By this point in the researched argument unit, we've studied argument structures, that thesis, reasons, and evidence that we keep talking about. We've also looked at audience appeals, the logos, ethos, pathos. We've looked at source evaluation, citations, and several other crucial tools to this genre. This video will give you a crash course in considering how to bring together your claim, reasons, and evidence in paragraph form, as well as to go beyond these individual elements and connect them to your argument through development. But what does development look like in a researched argument? As this slide addresses, development does include evidence in its various forms, but it also goes beyond the evidence to explanation, which expands past the evidence and into the writer's argument, not just by repeating the argument of the source being quoted. So let's look at an example. Pause this video and read through the claim, reason, and pieces of evidence that this imaginary student is working with. Once you've read, unpause the video and move to the next slide. In this slide, we see the imaginary student has taken the thesis, reason, and evidence for that reason and connected them together in a paragraph form, as you have already begun doing or will soon begin to do with your research. The issue, however, is that simply restructuring from fragments into a paragraph is not the same as synthesizing the information with your own thinking and argument. When we cross out the thesis, reason, and evidence, there's little to no material contributed by our hypothetical student. In a sense, we get only the repetition of ideas outside the student's argument, which walks the line of plagiarizing. This is another way of saying that for your researched argument to be successful, you must go beyond restating evidence and say something about the elements relevant to your specific claim. So let's look at another example from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. I'm going to read this one so that I can sort of evaluate a little bit for you as I go. So the first line, you deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham. This is where King acknowledges the main idea that he's responding to. The next sentence, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. This is where King is responding to the general idea and establishing his position. The rest of the paragraph. I'm sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes. It is unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate that the city's white power structure left the Negro community with no alternative. This is where King is developing his stance, right? Going beyond just saying whether he agrees or disagrees. Now, there's not evidence in the same way that you might think of finding evidence in your researched arguments so far. But we can see some of the other tools at place, right? So I'm sure that none of you would want to rest content. You know, he's trying to empathize with his audience. He calls the social analysis superficial as a way of subtly pointing out, right, that not going beyond this reaction could be superficial, but he doesn't understand them as an audience to be superficial. He's saying, I think that you can go beyond your own initial reactions. And when he says that it is unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate, this is a way of King identifying a concern of his audience, acknowledging it, saying, I hear you, but then turning it around and saying, but my claim is still more important. King is loosely following the Treac structure, in which the topic sentence introduces the main idea. There's the reason, right, or a sort of stance supporting the idea. You've got your evidence, which might be a quote from a speech, might be statistics, etc. And then there's the multiple sentence response and expansion upon those ideas, right, a way to tie it to your argument. And then the end of your paragraph should usually be something that either concludes that idea or acts as a kind of bridge, taking us into the next paragraph.